Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all here in this session at TNV Academy. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our eminent speaker, Mr. Srinivasan Sitaraman today, who is going to talk to us about aspect and impact in association with ISO 14001 standard. In this webinar today, Mr. Sitaraman will discuss this topic in detail along with some real-life examples he has experienced in the industry. Our distinguished speaker, Mr. Sitaraman, has done his post-graduation in chemistry from Annamalai University, India. He is a lead auditor in ISO 9001, 14001, 45001, and ISO 50001 standard. He has an industrial experience of around 30 plus years in field of manufacturing of non-ferrous alloys, lamp components, and primary and secondary batteries. He has worked in countries such as India, South Africa, and Oman. He has been imparting training to a number of organizations, entrepreneurs, and executives on various topics related to ISO standards and their certification and implementation. It was just a brief introduction of our guest speaker today. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Srinivasan Sitaraman. I may request Mr. Sitaraman now to please start the session on implementation of on implementation of aspect and impact in accordance with ISO 14001.
Okay, so today's topic is aspect impact assessment under environmental management system. So this is as per the ISO 14001 standard, which is for environmental management system implementation. One of the important steps is identifying aspects and assessing the impacts out of the organization's activities, processes, and services. So that's why we are looking at it today. And ISO 14001, for information, is an international standard for environmental management system. We have done a separate webinar on that. You can refer to that later. Okay, this standard has been developed by Technical Committee 207. So they are dedicated with the task of developing this standard. And whenever there is revisions happening, these people will be involved and taking all the inputs, and then they will be revising the standards. It provides a framework for improving the environmental performance. So whenever we talk of environmental performance improvement, there should be a framework under which we will be working so that we will be achieving the objectives. So the policy, the plan, and then the objectives and targets and the management programs all are coming out of the implementation of this ISO 14000 standard. And when I talk of environmental performance improvement, 3 R's of environmental performance are important. One is reduce. First of all, looking at optimizing usage so that we don't waste energy, resources, or anything for that matter. So we have to reduce the usage or optimize the usage of raw materials and natural resources. If at all we use, we try to reuse them. Suppose that there is a wastage generated, try to reuse them in the process so that we don't contaminate the environment and pollute the environment. Then recycle. Suppose any waste generated, we try to recycle them so we don't have to depend on natural resources again. Some waste can be made into wealth. So reduce, reuse, and recycle in the same order, we have to think of environmental performance. So now we will focus our attention on the aspect impact assessment. So under which clause of this standard is this aspect and impact assessment is being talked about? So we need to understand that. So I have given you the PDCA structure of the ISO 14001 2015. As you can see, clause 4, 5, 6, 7 are involved in planning, and the execution is very smooth under clause 8. And then clause 9, we are doing the performance evaluation, which is nothing but checking whether we are doing as per plan, and then action towards improvement, which is happening in clause 10. So now under this clause, you can see under clause 6.1, that is where we are focusing today, because the aspect and impact is being discussed there. So it talks about including aspects and impacts and compliance obligations, and we have to look at the risk to the environment coming out of that. So like we say risk to customer satisfaction in ISO 9001, here whatever we are doing is going to impact the environment, whether positive or negative. So we need to be aware of it. So that's what we are talking in aspects and impact assessments. Okay, so now we will see the definitions of aspects, impact, and associated terms before going for the assessment. When I say aspect, it is nothing but element of the organization's activities, products, and services that interacts or can interact with the environment. Suppose you are an organization where you are getting some activities, products and also you are involved in service industry. So activities, products and services. Then whatever interaction with the environment. When I say environment, there are three things we need to know: air, water and land. These are the three things where the interaction can happen, majority. Okay, so what type of interaction it is happening, that's what we are assessing in the aspect identification. Then we look at the impact. Because of our aspect, what are the impacts? Change to the environment. Because of the interaction, what change is happening to the environment? There are two changes can happen. One is beneficial change or adverse change. For example, you are doing some recycling of some materials, you are doing a beneficial change in the environment by not polluting the environment. But if you are dumping something, we are doing a adverse change in the environment because we are polluting the environment. So both changes have to be identified and assessed. That's why the impact will look at the change in the environment, whether adverse or beneficial, wholly or partially, resulting from organization's environmental aspects. Once you identify the aspect, we look at the impact from that aspect, whether positive or negative. Both has to be assessed and documented. Then life cycle perspective. This is also very important terminology we need to understand. This has been introduced in the ISO 14000 in the 2015 version of the standard. It talks about consecutive and interlinked stages of a product or service system, from raw material acquisition or generation from natural resources to final disposal. It means, in short, you can say cradle to grave. That means starting from the raw material acquisition, right from where the raw material is procured for the operations, till the product is at its end of life disposal. The entire value chain, the entire life cycle has to be assessed for aspects and impacts. That is what the standard is asking us to do. Okay, so we will talk about the life cycle perspective in a little later, but just the definitions we will cover it now. Prevention of pollution. So how do you prevent pollution? Use of processes, practices, techniques, materials, products, services, or energy to avoid, reduce, or control the creation, emission, or discharge of any type of pollutant or waste in order to reduce adverse environmental impacts. So when I say prevention of pollution, through various things, processes, practice, techniques, your materials and products and services, even energy. For example, if you are using coal-fired power station and the energy coming out of it, that is a thermal power station, and we are getting the energy, so we are also indirectly contributing to global warming because the power station is generating a lot of carbon dioxide in the process. Suppose you go for a renewable energy source, we are getting power but not from a thermal power station, but a renewable source like a solar power or wind power. So naturally we are not contributing to the pollution. So we have to look at all aspects of our operations, right from energy consumption to use of products and services. So all that areas we have to see what type of pollutant or waste in order to reduce adverse environmental impact. That's where we are preventing the pollution. So these are some of the definitions which we will have to look at in our webinar today. Now we will come to life cycle perspective in a little macro level. We look at what is it about. So any organization has got processes. So and for these processes they need raw materials as inputs, and then various other materials will be coming in, services will be coming in to satisfy the requirements of the processes. So in all these activities and processes, we need to see what type of environmental aspects are there. So that's what one is. First, cost to environment to create the raw material, right from the generation stage, raw material where it is getting generated and transported. We have to look at all that environmental impact coming out of it by looking at those aspects. Then byproducts of raw material. Suppose your raw material, you are doing something, mining, you are also having a lot of byproducts in the process. To generate your raw material, the service provider or the supplier or external provider will be making some byproducts which are also indirectly contributing to environmental performance. So we need to be aware of it. Then your processes, maintaining those processes, maintenance and other things, there will be some kind of impact because oil and things, grease and all you are using, as well as the waste oil, whatever we are cleaning up, that is all going to be wasted or recycled. Whatever we do, there are some aspects to be considered there. Then the legal requirements. What are all the compliance obligations organizations to meet in terms of legal requirements? From that point of view, any aspects need to be considered. So we have to consider that. Then purchasing materials, we have already talked about. Production needs. in the production processes, what are all the environmental aspects you have to consider. Then legal requirements we talked about. Then everywhere, in right from raw material procurement to end of life disposal, various stages, there are legal requirements. We need to consider all of them. And then outgoing to customer. Once the product goes out, there is transportation of the material to customer, dealers, and other things. So there is also some kind of environmental aspect. By transporting, we are using a kind of vehicles which are using primary fuels. So there is a kind of environmental to be considered. And then cost to environment to disposal of packaging and product. At the end of the customer's hand, we may have some packaging he has to dispose of in an environmental friendly manner. So we need to take responsibility for that also. So recently there is a regulation which has come in, end producer responsibility, extended producer responsibility. That means plastic manufacturers have to ensure at the end of their packaging or disposal how they take care of environmental conservation into consideration. So that's why they have to think about it. So the life cycle basically talks about the entire thing, right from raw material to finished product to end of life disposal. Here you can see there are three places we are saying consider and as appropriate, which is the design part of it. Suppose you got an equipment which you are designing for your process, you need to think of environmental performance there, that it doesn't consume a lot of energy. Indirectly, we are contributing to global warming. So we need to look at efficient, energy efficient design, which is also going to be translating into environmental performance improvement. Then in the procurement also, environmental requirements has to be considered as appropriate. And then production, definitely we have to look at the consideration of all the activities, whatever processes, whatever activities we are doing, what is the interaction with the environment. So each and every activity, you see what can happen to the environment. That's what we are going to see in aspects and impact today. Then you are also looking at transport and delivery of products, and also at the customer end usage, provide information about potential significant environmental impacts to the customer. So he takes an informed decision when he is using our products and services at the end of life. A simple example would be lead acid batteries we are using in our vehicles. At the end of its life, when it is discharged, we go back to the dealer, we give the old battery because it contains a lot of lead which is poisonous, so we don't want to dispose of it environment and create. So we get some monetary benefit out of it by getting a discount on the new battery. That is what we are talking about, end of life treatment and final disposal, so that it goes back to the manufacturers. They can recycle the lead and put it in the new battery. So that is what is the good way of recycling. So we have to think about the end of life as well, not just after manufacturing and given to customer, our job doesn't end there. So as an organization, we have to look at the entire right from raw material to end of disposal. So everywhere we have to consider our life cycle perspective while doing the assessment. Now, what all things we need to look at when I say environmental aspects? Emissions to air. There are three things: air, water, and land, which are very important. What are our activities? What is the interaction with the atmosphere, and also release to water, and then release to land? Of the three things, emission to air, release to water, and release to land, I would say emissions to air is very, very critically to be looked at, because once it is out in the atmosphere, it is a global phenomena. What happened in Chernobyl in 1984, because of the nuclear accident, the radioactivity release is basically into the atmosphere. Then it started traveling with the wind speed and other weather patterns. We could detect in India after 8 years, it becomes pollution in India also. That's why emissions to air has to be looked at very critically when we do the aspect impact assessment. Release to water kind of can be controlled, which is very limited boundary will be there, so we can do some kind of treatment which is very, very much under control. Same way, release to land also, contamination will be localized. We can remediate the soil and try to mitigate the impact. But emissions to air, once it is out, it is very difficult to capture it back and then treat them to mitigate them. So that's why we have to look at it more carefully. Use of space. Space is also a consideration which serves the premium. We cannot just be dumping and making landfills. There is a lot of population explosion is happening. So space is also a constraint. So we have to look at how to economize space and how to unnecessarily dump in material and create space occupation. So we have to see how to effectively recycle them so we can save the space. Then use of energy. that also contributes indirectly to environmental performance. So we have to look at that. Energy emitted like noise, heat, and radiation, which also will be affecting the people, the interested parties, and also employees in a way they are also affecting. So that also to be considered. And generation of waste and raw materials. So how do we take care of that? That also has to be one of the aspects to be considered. Use of raw material and natural resources. One of the thing is how much of natural resource we are using, and when we consider that aspect, we can also look at how can we minimize the usage and optimize our usage. That's why that also has to be focused in our aspects consideration. Okay. Now some of the examples of aspects and the impacts we will look at here. One of them is air emissions. Suppose something is emitted from our stack. So that is a kind of aspect coming out of our activity, which may be running of our operation, where the stack emission is bound to happen. So that air emission is happening. So that is only aspect. Now we are going to assess the impact, which is air quality degradation. So the identification of aspect and the impact has to be clearly demarcated. We cannot write pollution coming out of the stack. That means we are actually coloring the aspect with the impact also. So we have to analyze the impact separately so that we can rate it and then identify the significant environmental impact from that. So air emission is aspect, air quality degrading or air pollution or a particular gas, if you analyzed and found what is coming out of the stack, we can say because of this, it is a pollution to the environment. Like that, we can critically understand and analyze it. Okay. Second, consumption. That is the aspect. What is the impact can be water resource depletion. So once you know water resource depletion is impact, we need to see how effectively we can consume water efficiently so that we do not deplete our natural resources. So that is why it is aspect and that is a impact. It's a negative or adverse impact we are showing here. Okay. Fuel release, accidental spillage happening because of some operational control not effective. So what can be the impact? Stormwater contamination. That means it is spill on the floor and rain is happening. The entire thing gets washed off and then your stormwater drains are contaminated and it can also pollute the water bodies around your organization. So that is the impact. Same way, fuel release, accidental spills causing soil contamination, also water pollution. Once it is in the soil, it can also through rain gets dissolved and it can go into water pollution also. So one aspect can have more than one impact. Please understand that an activity can have more than one aspect. One aspect can have more than one impact. Here we have got a soil contamination to be assessed separately, water pollution also to be assessed separately as an impact. Two ways. Then noise generation, here is area nuisance and also human health effect. People are getting used to high noise, then basically they get hearing impairment and it is also not good for their well-being. Also area nuisance, people are not able to focus, and then neighboring communities are also getting a lot of problem from this high noise generation from the organization. So that's how we need to separate. Energy consumption, lights and all left on, what can be the impact? Impact is increased emissions because we are using the thermal power for this purpose. So there will be a lot of carbon emission happening. We means warming happening. Also fossil fuel consumption. That is another impact. This we are depleting our natural resources. So that is energy consumption. Recycling of paper, that is also a kind of aspect. But here you see, interestingly, it is a positive impact. Landfill space conserved, raw material conserved. So we are doing recycling, which is a good initiative where a positive impact on the environment. We don't have to cut down trees. We are able to save the trees, and the landfills are also saved because we are not dumping the general waste in the environment. Okay, so this is how we need to be able to clearly demarcate what is aspect and what is the impact. Now, for the participant, I have got a exercise where you can put the answer on the chat box, where we can say whether it is aspect or impact, or it can be both. So some of the examples I am giving. Loss of biodiversity. So basically, the animals belonging to the particular area are they are being basically reducing in population, which is also not maintaining the ecological balance. So what do you think? Is it a aspect or impact? You can put your answer in the chat box. I see a lot of responses coming there. Yeah, most of them have got it right. This is basically an impact of some aspect maybe culling of these rhino horns, or basically some indiscriminate hunting of this, resulted in this impact, which is loss of biodiversity. Those animals belonging to that area, geographical area, are getting extinct. So that is the loss of biodiversity. Next one is loss of marine life. Yes, go on. Yeah, right. Most of you are guessed it right. This is loss of marine life, is again an impact of a aspect which can be pollution of aquatic bodies. What happens because of the pollution? The oxygen present in water, which is called dissolved oxygen, the fish are able to assimilate that oxygen and they live in water. Whereas we oxygen from air, we are able to live, but fish has got a capacity, they can assimilate oxygen from the water, dissolved oxygen. So that's why they live in water, they can't live in air because they can't assimilate the air from the atmosphere. But that oxygen is getting consumed by pollution in terms of biochemical oxygen demand or chemical oxygen demand. This oxygen gets consumed. So the dissolved oxygen levels are going down and the fish are dying in the lakes and other water bodies. Okay. Air emissions. I just see stacks, the emission is coming. So we are saying air emissions. So what is your take on this? Yes, you are right. This is only aspect now, because we don't know what kind of gases or what kind of thing is coming out of it. We have to do the analyze and then we have to look at the impact. A proper assessment can be done. So currently it is only an aspect category. Okay. Deforestation. It's an interesting one to note. Let's see the responses. Yes, some of them are saying it's an aspect. Some are saying it's impact also. You guessed it right. It can be both ways. It can be an aspect as well as impact. If I say aspect, is basically cutting down of trees. So that can be an aspect which can lead to deforestation. The other way is acid rain happening in continents, especially in Europe. It was very high, and even in India, certain areas like Agra and all, there were a lot of foundries, because they were having these kind of gases which are coming out, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide. In rain, they form acids. So when they fall in the environment, this acid rain is completely making the soil infertile. Because of that, also the forestation is gone. So the trees are gone. So that is why deforestation can be, if you look at cutting down of trees, it is an aspect. But if you look at acid rain, it is an impact. So both ways it is. Then mining, lastly. So mining can be, yes, you guessed it right. It is activity or aspect. So we have to look at the impact because of indiscriminate mining. What can happen to the environment? We have to look at the impact and assess. Currently, it is an aspect only. So like that, when we look at our activities in our organization, the processes, we have to clearly see what is the aspect and assess the impact. Then only we can address these significant aspects based on our rating process. Okay. So now let's see aspect assessment. Here, what are we doing? First, we have to look at what all processes we are having in our organization. We have to list all the processes so that we do not miss out anything. So that's where we have to look at inventory of activities for every process, right from input to output. We have to consider all the things. I said already, life cycle perspective. Same way, when you look at the activities, what all things you are doing in the process, you list down all the activities. Then look at their interaction with the environment. That's what we call identification of aspects. Both the three mediums, air, water, and land. All the three mediums, we have to see what is the interaction. And factors to consider in this aspect assessment are severity of that particular aspect. Once you have identified aspect, you looked at when you look at the impact, what all things you have to see, how severe is it? What is going to be happening in the environment. I already gave a clue. If it is a air pollution, I would make it more significant because we don't have a control over it. It is going to be a global phenomena. Land and water, we will be able to have a kind of containment and do something about it. So like that, we have to look at severity. How severe is the impact in the environment? Probability. How likely this is going to occur? If it is happening on a daily basis, a regular basis, we have to give a high rating for it. So that we do the assessment of this environmental risk, we can find out which is going to be the significant aspect based on a rating. So severity, how severe is to the environment, and then probability, how much likely it is going to occur in our operations. Okay, whatever aspect we are thinking. And then detectability. Means, are we able to detect it? So we can do some action to control it. If you are not able to detect anything, simple example is like carbon monoxide. It is a colorless, odorless gas. If it is escaping in the environment, it is a poisonous gas, but we can't see it, we can't smell it, we can't do anything about it. So that detectability is very low. So the rating will be very high for this, which easily can be detected, then the rating will be very low. Like a smoke coming out, we can see clearly the particulates, the black thing coming out of the chimney. So we can say detectability is high. Something is wrong. We can see immediately the black smoke from the stack. So our operations are not doing right. Something is escaping. So like that, detectability is also one of the factors to be considered to do the rating. IP, business concern. That means interested party or business concern. If it is going to be a huge property damage, going to be a damage to the reputation of the company, then we should think it as a very significant aspect. Also, interested parties, employees working in the area are affected, or neighboring community is going to be affected by polluting the water bodies. Because of that, they are going to have sicknesses, diseases. Then that is the interested party concern or business concern. Reputation of the company is at stake. We have to rate it very high. So that's why we have to consider that also in our assessment. Legal requirements, very important, because if you violate legal norms, you will not be able to operate your organization, because it can be penalized or it can be closed also. So that's why legal requirement also will form part of our assessment process. What type of environmental risk we are getting out of it, we have to put that also. Okay, life cycle perspective, we already discussed it, right from raw material stage to the end of life disposal. Everywhere we look at life cycle perspective and see what type of interaction it can have. Once you have finished your production, sent to the customer, he has used it, and then he has disposed of the packaging and the material also at the expired product, what it can do to the environment if it is lying open in the environment. So that's also we have to consider. That's why life cycle consideration is very important. One activity has many aspects. Like we already saw, one activity can have many aspects. Like operation of a particular thing, there will be so many activities, so many aspects will be there. And another point is, one aspect can have many impacts. That also we saw. Land contamination also can happen, and also water contamination. Like for example, smoke coming out of the chimney. Smoke has got particulates. So initially it will be atmospheric pollution, so interaction with the air. Then slowly these smoke particles will agglomerate, and then they, due to heaviness, they will settle down on the land. So land contamination also is possible. That's why one aspect may have many impacts. There may be one impact or many impacts. So that's what we need to be aware of. Then what are the controls we are having? When we do the rating, we also need to look at currently what all controls are there. There is a detection mechanism, there is an alarm system, immediately people come to know of it. So naturally the rating on detectability will be very low based on that. Or there are very good procedures in the operation area, people know about it, and they are not, they are very careful about these things. So naturally the probability of things will be very low. But severity will still be there, because that is going to have interaction. If at all it escapes these things, these filters, it is going to have interaction with the environment. So severity will remain in the initial rating, but probability and detectability will change as per our operational controls, better detection mechanisms, and things like that. Also, environmental management programs. If you have got some programs that also will focus on that, it will reduce the rating of impact. Then emergency response drills. Suppose we have got a very good system where we are doing some simulated emergencies, and we are carrying out drills, so that our preparedness for a real emergency is very good. So naturally our controls are better, so our impact rating also will be accordingly evaluated. So these are the some of the things we have to think about it as a control. Then live document. This aspect impact register is not once done and dusted and kept in cupboards. It has to be a live document. That means we have to constantly review them whenever new processes, new equipments, things are happening in the organization. We have to update this record. That's why regular review and update. Normally I would recommend once in a year. Definitely it has to be updated, reviewed. Also, whenever new equipment is installed in the area, so naturally your aspects now will be different. So we have to look at assessing the aspects. Process modification, like piping and all is changed, routing differently, some new fixtures are added, process are changed, the way we operate. So naturally interaction has to be assessed again. And then whenever some incident happened in the organization where there is a emergency happened and a spillage happened, so we have to again look at our aspect register whether this has been identified or not. If identified, well and good, we can look at our rating process based on the incident occurred. If not identified, we have to include it in the aspect. So that is why it is important to review this and make it as a live document. Now I have got a sample register here which we call aspect register, where we are identifying all the aspects and assessing the impact out of it. So this you can see company logo will be there, company name, and then we call it environmental aspects and identification and rating. So that's a register. There will be a form because it's a doc and record we have to keep. There should be a document control for it. So will be a specific unique number will be given, and also when it is revised, reviewed. That is very important so that we can evidence the regular review of this, so that that review date is put there. Then aspect number, like you list down aspects, there may be 100, 200. So we can see how many aspects are there in our organization. So it should be serialized. Then activity, sub-activity. So we are now looking at each process, taking down the aspect activity. What all things we are doing, writing that. Like, operation of this particular refinery, operation of this particular equipment, we put it as activity. Now we are looking at the interaction. Because of this operation, what is the interaction happening on the environment? Through water, through air, and through land. What is the interaction? That we put it there. Now we are looking at a kind of code can be given, or we can just say, whether it is going to be a resource depletion, or whether it is going to be a natural resource consumption, or whether it is going to be a air pollution, water pollution, like that. We can maybe have a codification, we can mention it there. Now we say the impact. Impact has to be assessed based on the aspect and put it down there. What is the impact? Now the migration pathway and receptor. This is also very important. How the whatever interaction is happening through the environment. That's what we call migration pathway. I gave an example of smoke coming out of chimney. So now what is the migration pathway? First it will be in the atmosphere. So air is the first medium, and then slowly it will settle down in the land. So land will be the final receptor, means finally where it is going. It can go either in land or maybe in the water body also. So they are called receptors, final resting place of that particular aspect. So migration pathway can be air, water, or land, but the receptor will be where finally it is ending. Okay. Nature of operation. We are looking at qualitative rating and quantitative rating. So what is qualitative rating? Where we are looking at whether it is a regular normal operation, we are talking about this aspect, or a sudden accidental spillage, or whenever we do some abnormal activity once in 2 years or once in a while, which is not a regular activity. So it can be regular or normal, abnormal, or potential emergency, something like a busting of a tank, which is not going to happen on a regular basis. It is a potential emergency which we need to consider it as a very high possibility if there is a very low controls available. So like that, these are nature of operation: normal, abnormal, potential emergency. Then we look at compliance obligations. This is another word for legal requirements in ISO 14000 standard. Is there an illegal requirement for this particular gas emitting from the stack, or for particular contaminant going in the water, or particular discharge on the land? So we need to look at the legal requirement part of it and say yes or no. That's all. Then business concern, that is this particular aspect impact going to be a damage to the reputation of the company, or there is going to be a loss to the company in terms of monetary loss, name loss, whatever it is. That's called business concern. So if it is yes, you put it yes, so it will be assisting in our rating. Then interested party concern, that means our neighboring community is going to be affected by this particular aspect getting a negative impact on the environment. So we have to identify that employees, are the employees going to be negatively impacted by it. So we put that also a concern. Concern means negative. If it is not there, you just say no. So yes or no only. That's why it is called qualitative. Now coming to the quantitative rating, where we give a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 or even 1 to 10 according to the way the organization decides. Probability of occurrence. If it is happening on a daily basis, then you will have to rate it very high in your. If it is happening rarely or almost never happened, you can give a lowest rating for it. But it should never be 0. It should always be starting from 1 and whatever maximum you want to decide, you can decide. So that is probability. Then affecting health, that is what is interested party concern. Suppose employees' health or even neighboring communities' health, if it is affecting, that we have to consider it as a rating, where high impact will be higher rating, low impact will be low rating, which will be 1. Affecting resources, like you are wasting, like sudden spillage has happened, so there is going to be a lot of wastage of natural resources, so you'll have to rate it very high. If it is only a minor spillage regularly happening little bit, you can say it can be a low rating. Then controls, if you have got a very good controls available, then your rating will be very low. If you do not have any control, it is happening out of control, your rating will be high. So now we are talking quantitative rating here. And then probability of detection. If I'm able to detect this particular aspect creating impact through our detectors mechanism of measuring and monitoring, then we can have a very low rating on that. But if you do not know when it is escaping to the environment, when it is getting released, then detectability is very poor, then it will be very high rating on that. So now we are doing combination of all these, the occurrence, the affecting health, the business concern, as well as detectability. I am putting a rating by combining all this, which is what is the formula, that is risk priority number, RPN. That will tell the higher number means that aspect is going to be a significant aspect. If it is a lower number means it is one of the aspects, but I don't need to prioritize anything on it. It can just continue while I focus my attention on significant environmental aspect. So the purpose of this aspect impact register is to identify the significant environmental aspects that will come out here. And some of the overriding criteria, like if it is a legal requirements, I would straight away make that particular aspect significant aspect, because there is a legal angle to it. So we should be very careful by not violating the legal requirements. That's why I keep it as a separate one. And affecting life cycle, the product, if it is yes, then I have to also look at significance out of it. That's why the life cycle has to be considered in the entire aspects identification. And then what are all the controls we are having, we need to document it so that we know these controls are enough or additional controls are required. That's why that one has to be mentioned in the register. So now the significant environmental aspect will come out of the rating we are doing as per the risk priority number. So we decide a certain amount of number above which if any aspect is there, we will consider it as significant. If it is below that, we will just keep it in the register, but we will do nothing about it because we have got significant aspects to be controlled. Okay, the purpose of the register is only that. Okay, so now why do we do this significant environmental aspect? What is the thing? First, it is identifying aspects. Then we are looking at through the aspect impact assessment whether it is significant or not. If it is not significant, then you just say it remains on the list. That's all. We have identified. Auditors are happy that we have identified all the aspects. Now, if it is significant, what do we need to do? It becomes a significant aspect. That's what we call SEA, significant environmental aspect. Now, we have to see whether it is under control. Our control measures will tell whether it is under control or not. If it is yes, then operational controls, we can continue to have them, and then we maintain our performance size. If it is not under control but want to do more, that means it is not under control, but it is to be done. So we take objectives and targets. Now we have taken a objectives and targets. There is a management program to be taken, and we have to address it now. Means we take EMP. EMP means environmental management program and operation control. If it is not required, then we just straight away say operational controls are enough, and then we can continue to monitor it. This is to help the organizations not to have EMPs for all their significant aspects. Some of them through operational control itself they can maintain. That's why they just continue the operation control, so they keep it under watch so that it doesn't go out of control. And if you need to take some environmental management program based on the economy of the particular situation, whether we can adequately provide the resources for that, we can take an environmental management program and carry on with it. So it will be a time-bound program where we have a set target, and there will be people involved, and then the resources will be provided to achieve the objective. So that's what we have to look at it. That's why we call deployed in EMS. When I have a EMP, then we have to document in the system, and then we have to monitor the progress and report it in the management reviews. So this is what is the purpose of identifying the significant environment aspects to control them so that we can improve our environmental performance. Okay, with this I conclude this session on the aspect impact assessment. Now I am open for questions.
We have got some few questions in our chat box, sir, from
Yes,
the
sir.
participants. I'll ask them one by one from you.
I'm sure all of you are implementing this environmental management system in your respective organization, and integration of this with the other management systems are also possible with the high level structure. So that's good with this EMS.
Yes, sir. So I have got the questions.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Actually, I was collating all the questions we received on chat box. So the first question I have received is, can we exclude some activities of organization from the aspect assessment process?
As I said, our main aim is to improve the environmental performance and not certification of ISO 14001. So definitely our focus should be how we can improve the environmental performance. So we need to include all the activities which organization is involved in, so that we can assess all of them, what is interaction with the environment and the impacts out of it. So we should not exclude any of our activities. It's a requirement that we include all the activities and what are all the aspects associated with that, we have to consider in our aspects assessment.
Thank you, sir. The second question which we have received is, how many SEAs are acceptable for an organization?
There is no fixed number for it. It depends on the nature of the products and services of the operation. But you cannot say there is no SEA in our organization. Always, we need to, even if we have got some aspects, we have to make some of them significant so we can work on it. We cannot say, best among the worst, like that. Whatever aspects are there, based on a rating mechanism, we need to identify some aspects which will be significant, which we need to work on, because it's a continual improvement process. So there is no fixed number to it, but at least there should be some significant aspects for you to work on, either through operational controls or setting up environmental management programs for that. So there is no fixed number for these aspects.
Thank you, sir. One more question is, are all SEAs, do an organization need environmental management programs for all the SEAs identified?
As I said earlier, the SEAs, whatever is identified, we have to see whether we have got the resources available, we have got the finances available to take it as a management program, which will be taking up as a project with a lot of financial resources, people resources will be involved, equipment purchase and all this will be there. So we have to see the business perspective, whether it is viable for the organization to go for it. Otherwise, we can take operational control and maintain that these aspects are under control, under monitoring, so it does not escalate to a negative level. So all need not be addressed with the environmental management program. Either you can do it through operational control, other procedures and monitoring mechanism. We can try to mitigate the impact by having better controls in place. So wherever possible, as far as practicable, you can take up EMPs, but otherwise operation control should be there. So once you have decided this is SEA, some kind of mechanism should be put in place, either through environmental management program or through better operation controls, training, awareness. You can control the aspects.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering all the questions that has been asked by the participants.
Yes.
We can now come to the conclusion of this particular session. I extend my gratitude and thanks to Seetharaman sir for joining this webinar today and sharing his knowledge and wisdom and expertise over this essential topic, which is covered under ISO 14001 aspect and impact assessment. The knowledge you shared, the way you have elaborated all the concepts and have given us a detailed information about the concept of aspect and impact was very incredible. I thank all the participants for being an active part of this webinar and putting across your questions. I look forward joining all of you again in an exciting new session. Till then, I wish you all the best from behalf of TNV Academy for all your future endeavors. It's goodbye from me now. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. Thank you so much.